All right, y'all. So, real quickly as we get started here, I'm having to use the mic that for a couple of months would kind of go in and out on its own accord. So, if I have any issues with this, please let me know in the chat. Um, and with that, we'll get started. So, three, here we are again, third time in a week or 3 weeks in succession rather that I'm sitting here doing a instant reaction podcast to where Florida State loses. Florida State loses tonight to Clemson 34-28. And we can talk about the game. Look, I've had to do some really tough instant reactions on this channel. This isn't necessarily one of them. I mean, the depressing, frustrated, whatever you want to label some of the post game emotions that we go through as fans. I don't think it's really, you know, if anything, it just kind of revisits what you felt last week. What transpired tonight makes a week ago all the more painful and all the more of a realization that you really let one get away. And you know, tonight, I don't want to say it played out exactly like we thought it was, but fairly close. I think I had 28-21. Bud said his internal numbers had this at something like 34-22, and I think he formally predicted 31-21. So a wild game in which you see Florida State come out and have an incredible amount of success running the ball, relatively speaking, against the opponent that they were playing against. Have really some interesting stuff dialed up that I look forward to going back and looking at. You're using your tight ends fairly creative. Something I mentioned in the preview is that you might the tight ends would be focused or featured. You have, I know, 3 plays in that opening drive where you come out, you're double tight, and it very much appeared to be of the idea that if you're going to have success running the ball on Clemson, that you needed to do it coming out of the gate on non-predictable running downs, because obviously, we're aware as to what this offensive line does in those situations, and particularly, with a team like Clemson. So you have some great success early. You have a really interesting game plan that allows you to score twice. And at 14-14, this looks like a really good game. You have a couple minutes at the end of the half that, honestly, y'all, is the game over at halftime? No. Is the game over after that kickoff return and as soon as Clemson scores? Yeah, I think so. I'm trying to find some way to say this. Like, I think you can acknowledge that Florida State doesn't quit. Absolutely. I mean, if the game isn't over immediately after they score, it's certainly over with about 7 minutes left. And, you're looking at what a score of 34-14, I think at the time, game's over. And all too frequently, we've had these situations where you have to ask yourself, oh, well, this game's over and we're just playing these last, 22 minutes to see who's bought in and who still wants to try. Now, on the plus side, I think the answer you got was pretty much everybody on your roster. Obviously, it is a negative that you're still having to ask yourself questions like that in year 3, and you would have thought that you could get away from situations like that. But you have a period of play there that is as deleterious as can be to being competitive with a team and a program like Clemson, is how you end your half. 17-14, and you just have a fumble in a situation where you can't have a fumble. And I know that's kind of silly fan talk to be critical of Jordan in that situation, but the events that transpired there is the exact the definition of what can't happen. You can't give Clemson a chance. They're already getting the possession coming out of half, and everybody, if you weren't familiar with what middle eight meant before going into this game, we all got a crash course on it, or a reminder on it, depending as to your previous knowledge of the subject. But Florida State more or less gives this game away. And Clemson was a more talented team. Clemson is uh, not like a master class in coaching, but well coached, and uh, you just can't be providing situations like that to a team. And coming out of half and giving up the kickoff return that you did, it's a tough night for three in general. The first, I see a commenter comparing our middle eight to the Red Wedding, and that is unfortunately too accurate. There, Prince. You're Yeah, and I just totally lost my train of thought there. So can't be laughing at Game of Thrones references during the instant reaction. That's a lesson learned. Um, but Knowles has the play that we're all going to look at early, where it's 7-0. He comes on a blitz, misses a quarterback there, and Dent. I'm a little bit frustrated with how Dent plays that as well, as far as how hard he comes crashing down from the safety position. But my point there on Knowles is that you know TJU is a tough guy to sack. Asking him to just sack a quarterback on a blitz like that is a lot, but you can't whiff there. You have to make the quarterback be adjusted in what he's trying to do by your presence when you're coming in a situation like that. And that was kind of the first of a little bit of an unraveling for Florida State's defense there. My other kind of roundabout way of talking about Knowles and some frustrations that I had with him, I had to go back and look, but the effort put in on the kick coverage on the return that Chip gave to open the second half is frustrating. And maybe I'm being unjustly critical. Again, this is an instant reaction podcast where we sit down, talk about what we saw, or sometimes more appropriate, what we thought we saw, and then can go back and try to confirm over the next 36 hours or so. But I have a frustrating night with Knowles, and those are just two examples of it. Do want to thank our sponsors that make the Knowlecast possible. Instant reactions, we just sit down, do these real quickly, but we do always want to thank the people that make the Knowlecast possible. Tarpon Sellers. You can go to tarponsellers.com. Knowlecast is the coupon code there. Louisiana Hot Sauce, the legendary team of Chad and Shannon at Legendary Home Loans, Congruity, and always our friends at Charlie Park. Again, if you're in Tallahassee, the brunch that they do on Sundays is as great as anything that's out there, and we would highly recommend that you give them consideration. So, I don't know the exact terminology. I don't want to say that you got a black eye in your recruiting efforts, because you didn't. If anything, the effort that you give in the fourth quarter there, despite a lot of the stadium being empty, helps you on that end. I think it. You didn't sink a ship, right? You didn't leave a taste in a whole lot of kids' mouths that as they left that stadium, as many other recruits have over the last 4 or 5 years, have to go back to a hotel tonight or tomorrow morning and look themselves in the mirror and they're like, yeah, I really want to be a part of that. So I don't think that you drink from like the poison chalice or something like that, if we're going to stay with various Game of Thrones references. But um, I don't know that you had a great night either. It'll be interesting to see how that plays out over time. But playing Clemson in that atmosphere, uh, and then all of a sudden, almost like the air gets taken out of the stadium there in the final minutes of the second quarter and the first minutes of the second half. That's tough. So again, I don't think it's anything that you necessarily um, suffer like defections from or something, but I don't know that you would have had like the effort or the product to sell if maybe that was a competitive game throughout and you lost just there at the end. So um, despite the 14 points in the fourth quarter, and I want to give credit to this team for continuing to try, and I also want to acknowledge, as I attempted to previously, that Florida State seems to have a lot of success in these games where I don't think it's really accurate to label it garbage time, y'all, but whatever the Venn diagram of is not garbage time, but not necessarily getting like the other team's most maybe focused effort, and also a much more conservative form of coaching. I do think you have to, uh, you can't just constantly praise kids for not quitting, while at the same time you want to, and at the same time you want to acknowledge that that is a step forward that's taken place in this program. But at some point that message, starts to fall on ears that don't really want to hear it anymore. Regardless of how this game ended, let's just hypothetically say this game ended 37-17 or something like that. I would have come on here and said, okay, Clemson's a better team, not the week to be like, super depressed or disappointed in the way an outcome of a game ended. Um, did you get through the game healthy? I think so. And the point that I'm trying to make, that it had this ended 37-17, I would have said, let's fast forward through this. Clemson's a good team. They beat you. Frustrating game management, frustrating string of mistakes, of which we've seen from this team more than we would have liked. But can you get through this healthy? And can you get in a situation where you can go through this bye week, come out of it, and win 4 or 5 games? Okay, you've got the Louisiana game, that of which you can feel relatively confident in. Do you, can you beat Georgia Tech? Of course you can beat Georgia Tech, and you need to beat Georgia Tech. So come out of there, out of the bye week, beat Georgia Tech, and turn your focus into winning, 3 out of 4. Yes, this team can do this, but I'm all the more, concerned that you could look at a team that could lose 2 or 3 games of their remaining ones as well. So this will be interesting. We all, as emotional fans, will be, glued to what we see and how this plays out, and we're going to get a great idea as the trajectory of this program and how it's going. I ultimately believe that they will win at least 3 and have a legitimate chance at winning 4. Um, but it's there's everything to play for, and I honestly think that there's a pretty big variance as to how these games could play out. You can see yourself winning 4, an outside shot at 5, and I could see you losing 3 as well. So um, it's a strange game in the fact that, like, you want to credit them for their fight. You want to continue to acknowledge that Jordan and all these other guys don't quit. They, you out there running, being aggressive, banging into the fourth quarter. And I'm talking about defensive effort that you get as well. But there are these, there's that moment in time during this game where you compile so many mistakes on top of each other, and you literally have offensive, defensive, and special teams failings in about a 5 minute game, a 5 minute window of game time that completely removes any chance of really winning this game. Um, yeah, I mean, we'll save the like the coaching. If we want to start talking about buyouts and coaching searches and stuff, we've got the next 5 weeks to let that organically solve itself. We'll figure out how that goes, and we'll be able to adjust accordingly. But um, Florida State plays Clemson well, all things considered, particularly well in the first 20 minutes of game time. Shows some things in the run game that they had not previously. Liked what they did with the tight ends, both in the tight, double tight looks, but also some of the other aspects of use of the tight end is on, I think, the fourth drive. You line up 87 out wide, and then I can't remember if you bring him down in motion, but he is the pin aspect of the pull and pin that you hear about this offense all the time. And I think the next play you bring 85 down and have him chip a defensive end blind, which is just what you have to do when you're playing a defense and a defensive line as good as this one. Um, Big credit to 85 on the one play that he makes there at the end of the game. Just great to see kind of that raw athleticism. A kid that is certainly that of what we know, uh, the future of the tight end room, and glad that he was able to have a moment there with a pass that think went somewhere ultimately for 30 yards or so after he got done dragging a Clemson defender for a couple yards. So Marquise Douglas really liked the two receptions that we saw out of you tonight, and a kid that's continuing to develop some. So I'll try to answer some questions if you guys have any. Um, the fake punt, I don't want to spend a whole lot of time on that. In my opinion, the game was done at that point. Uh, you you tried it because you tried it, and um, the more frustrating aspect of the special teams part of this conversation is the kickoff return. I mean, I know that um, there's been some nice moments from special teams this year, but there's also absent Fitzgerald's kicking. There's also been some real head scratchers, and as I believe I said last weekend, it is consistently frustrating to see Florida State play as poorly as they do on special teams, particularly when you account for how much time they spend on special teams in practice. So, um, yeah, a rough night for Knowles. Dent has had some moments and also some rough ones. Um, 13 is rough. I mean, I think you have to evaluate what you're doing. I don't like, again, there's probably a conversation for later in the year, but um, questions about what you're doing in the defensive back room, certainly. I mean, I think you just need to look at what you're doing and whether or not some of the recruiting wins that you get there are offset by coaching or perhaps lack of developing. So, a question that we can re-examine. Um, yeah, a question from Christopher in the chat about how Spain hasn't been getting more targets. Certainly involved a lot more tonight, particularly early. I just think that you don't really have a whole lot of opportunities with this offensive line to set up and block in a manner that's really conducive to what you want to do with Spain. I mean, he's not just a 9 route specialist, but for the most part, that's a kid that you want to use on long developing routes. And, as we were reminded again, uh, that's not what this offense's strength is. And again, y'all, I'm just not going to get that disappointed in this game. I mean, there's literally friggin' moments where you got Jazz Turntine trying to block KJ Henry. All right, that's as good of a summary as I can get. As yes, has this team gotten better? Are there more talented pieces overall? Yes, but you've suffered some really rough injuries, and you're still left in a situation where you got a guy in the portal that's trying his hardest, but you took him at a last minute, and you knew there was that he was basically a variant or an emergency play, and your emergency play is out there trying to block a kid that's going to be like a top 10 draft pick, and that's kind of where you still are. I'll have to go back and look at this, and I don't want to be too critical, uh, but I do think you need to get a little bit more of a higher level of play from 10 on your defense as well. That's a guy that you thought of that would be one of your defensive leaders as far as production and talk about him being one of the better safeties in the country. And, you can roll your eyes at talk, but I think you need to, from a guy that, how can I say this? My impression is that you probably, and there's no like stigma here, so I don't know why I'm hesitant to talk about it, but probably NIL was involved in keeping 10 around and keeping Fabian Lovett around, right? Um, and Fabian will probably be back for the Georgia Tech game. That'll be nice. And 10 has had a season, not nothing disastrous, but not the season that I think you thought you were going to get out of him. And I think he's probably battling a little bit of an injury there. So, surprise, surprise, Florida State's had had some injuries that have been impactful and negatively impactful on how this has played out. So, Florida State loses 34-28. I realize I've got Florida State loses 34-28 to Clemson in a game that's maybe not as close as the score would look. But again, for me tonight, and watching NC State play again today, it was just more about what transpired last weekend, and that's the real, frustration is. You came out tonight, you had a really good game plan, you got decent effort from your team, and ultimately kind of played out in a manner that I think a lot of people thought it would overall. So um, I see a question about Julian Armella. Yeah, I'll just reiterate what I said earlier in the week. I think that it wouldn't be a surprise to me if you didn't come out of the bye week playing Armella, and that's not necessarily like a knock on Jazz. Yeah, there's tough moments, but you're asking a lot of a kid that you knew that if you had to ask a lot of that kid, you're going to be in trouble. So if you're going to go through some of the growing pains, I think you should go through it with a kid that's going to be, in theory, one of your kind of feature aspects of the offensive foundation for the next couple of years. So, y'all appreciate the support. It's never a fun time to be talking about a third Florida State loss in a row at 12:30 in the morning, but it is what it is. Florida State has a bye week and then enters a 5-game stretch that will be fascinating and like words fail to state how important it is for the future of the program. You've got to get 3 at a minimum, and if you want to do what I think you can do on the recruiting trail, and maybe more importantly in the portal, you really got to do everything that you can to try to get 4. So, Bud and I will be back this week. We may only have one show this week with the idea that it's a bye week, but we'll be back at least once this week, and then we'll fall back into our regular schedule after the bye. So I realize it's going to be a tough, 2 weeks here with 3 losses in a row. I wouldn't get, I wouldn't get too negative about it. Just look and see what's out there, who's healthy, and you look at the next 5 games and everybody knows what you have to do. So appreciate it, y'all. I'm going to sign off here. Thanks for the support that we received. Bud and I are incredibly fortunate to be able to do this in the manner that we do and for as long as we have. And we wouldn't be able to do it without y'all. So till then, talk soon. Go Knowles.